appropriate to have these oversight hearings anytime there is an instance where the federal government or an agency of the federal government is really demonstrating palpable contempt of the people it is supposed to serve, the American people. And the 650,000 people I represent believe that that's what's happening with the FCC on the cross-ownership rules right now for two significant reasons, and I want to talk about those and ask the commissioners about that. The first reason is that the proposed rule Chairman Martin has proposed, and a lot of press accounts suggested, well, it only affected these top 20 markets and the First Amendment will be safe everywhere else. Well, in fact, if you read the rule, it essentially allows the FCC to remove these cross-ownership protections for the First Amendment in every market in the country, and even for these top four, to allow ownership of the top 4 media outlets, even in the top 20 markets. All it does is it allows the FCC to take bites out of the First Amendment in market by market and cloaks that in some innocuous language that it affects only the top 20 markets. So this is something that ought to concern everybody in small and large markets, and is certainly a concern to my constituents. And that's why, and I want to move to the second reason why I'm so concerned about this. Out in Seattle, we had a hearing we heard about at 5 p.m. on November 2nd to tell us about a hearing on November 9th. And just a week later, had effectively less than a week's notice, under the apparent attempt to reduce the number of people in Seattle are going to turn out, knowing Seattle has been a very vigorous opponent of these rules. It didn't work. Over 1,000 people showed up, stayed till 1 o'clock in the morning. And enormous eloquence, sincerity, and strength of the message don't do what the proposal of Chairman Martin is now proposing to do. And the thing that was most disturbing is that when you had 1,000 people staying at 1 o'clock at night on a Friday, on the next Tuesday morning in the New York Times, we see an op-ed by the chairman saying that he's going to propose rules that would basically ignore the testimony of these hundreds of people in Seattle the Friday before. Now, that troubles me because apparently this is an op-ed that I can't believe wasn't written before this testimony was even listened to. And we expect commissioners to go out and listen to the will of the American people, take testimony, evaluate it, work with the other commissioners, and come up with reasonable proposals. And my folks in Seattle believe that they were treated like a bunch of chumps out in there, that they had the FCC come out, fake like you're listening to them, and the deal was already done. And I don't think that's consistent with the obligation of FCC commissioners to listen to the people. The commissioners need to listen to the commissioned, who are the real bosses here. So my first question, Chairman Martin, is, was your op-ed, at least rough draft, written before you listened to these 1,000 people out in Seattle?
Sure, I was working on drafts of the op-ed. I'm sure I was working on the way out to Seattle as well.
And when did you send the final draft to the New York Times?
I don't recall. It was sometime over the. I'm sure it was sometime over the weekend. I don't know. I don't know whether I submitted it on Friday or Saturday. I don't know.
Well, knowing how the New York Times works, I bet you submitted it before that you heard the testimony in Seattle. And I'm going to ask you to check that out and let us know. But it doesn't really matter because it's pretty clear the minds were made up before 1,000 people spent their Friday night coming out to share their opinions with the people who are supposed to be working for them, not telling them what they're doing in their infinite wisdom. And I've heard arrogance out of Washington, D.C. before, and even though I work here, I don't believe it's the source of all wisdom. And I can respect people's academic assessments of this rule and studies that we do and everything else. But you know, the ultimate repository of wisdom in this country is the people that we work for. And they have told you repeatedly in very visceral terms, they don't like this idea of reducing the protection of cross-ownership between newspapers and electronic media outlets. And maybe you don't respect their views, but they're sincere and they have them, and we ought to listen to them a little bit. And what happened here is really a disgrace to that principle. And the folks in Seattle deserve an apology, frankly, for in this regard. And, you know, maybe you move forward after an apology with the rule you want, but this is not right. It does not sit well with me or them. So I'm hopeful that you'll go back and really think at some point about the substance of what the people in Seattle told you and reconsider this rule. Because I'll tell you what, the way you've set up this rule, it's clever. It says that, well, we have a presumption, you know, against in the smaller markets, the non-top 20 markets, we'll just have a presumption of innocence, if you will. Well, there's a lot of people sitting in jail where the presumption of innocence has been overcome. And in front of this jury, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be convicted, and the First Amendment's going to go down big time. This rule is wrong, and it should not stand. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair notes that all members of the subcommittee have been recognized to ask a round of questions. The gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, is not a member of the subcommittee, but a member of the full committee, and she is as faithful an attendee at these hearings as